Video games are everywhere. This hugely impactful and widely spread storytelling and stress relief media spans dozens of computer systems and consoles and shows up in pretty much every other aspect of popular culture. You pretty much can't turn on a television or surf the internet without some sort of video game character, ad, or aspect showing up. And that's okay. Video games offer us strange and exciting new worlds to explore and are often better than movies and television in the sense that the story can go on for hours, whereas movies and television are limited to a set number of hours. Not to mention that you can pretty much throw your physics book right out the window, and red, green, blue, purple, gray, metallic, gaseous, and shape-shifting people are all perfectly normal, as long as they're male. Almost every single one of my friends is very heavily into gaming, which means that oftentimes our conversations will devolve into quasi-in-depth descriptions of whatever game they're playing at the time, which, if I'm honest, I mostly tune out. This has more to do with the excessive use of, and this, that, and the other, and, to long story shorts, than any sort of disinteresting gaming on my part. It's hard to follow any sort of storytelling when the teller skips over huge chunks of the game in order to get to the punchline. Also, they're probably glossing over the random and normalized violence to women in the games that they play because they know that that bullshit pisses me off like nothing else. And they play everything from PC games to console games to handheld games, and also pencil and paper games like Dungeons & Dragons, Shadowrun, Pathfinder, and a game of my friend's own creation. In comparison, I play very few games. Yeah, I know, boo hiss. Or in some cases, well, you're a girl, so whatever. My reasons have nothing to do with my gender. As with many of my likes and dislikes, this has to do with my brother, who is also a gamer. Now, my brother's not nearly as bad as some of the people I've heard about on the internet, but he's up there. I'd say that he's at least a level 8 gamer, and he has been for most of my life. Those of you who have watched my other videos may recall the Magic the Gathering story. Well, that is but the tip of the iceberg when it comes to my brother and games. In my house, we had the original Nintendo, the Super NES, an Atari, a Sega Genesis, and an N64 all by the time I was 12. And of the 4 people in my immediate family, my brother logged at least 5 times as many hours as the rest of us combined. I might even go so far as to call him obsessed. When my brother wasn't playing video games, he was talking about video games, and it got so bad that my parents had to institute a number of hours per diem that my brother frequently ignored and that I never even came close to. The consoles that I was most into in my youth were the Super NES and the 64, because Mario and Donkey Kong. More Donkey Kong than Mario because we had more Donkey Kong games. We had all 3 of the Donkey Kong Country games and Donkey Kong 64. But we only had 3 Mario games. We had Super Mario 3 for the NES, Mario 64, and Mario Kart, which marked the first time that I ever called my mom a bitch when she edged me out for first place on Rainbow Road after shooting me 3 times in a row with red shells. And it wouldn't have been so bad if my dad hadn't also been playing at the time. Yeah, he took exception to that. Mom just laughed. Cackled, really. Jerk. Anyway, my brother and I's interactions with the 64, the console that caused the most tension between us, usually ran as follows. Dude, you've been playing all morning. Can I jump on? I want to play some Quest. Yeah, hold on. Okay. Dude. Yeah, hold on, I said. Will you freaking let me save? And eventually it ended like this. Alright, there, I'm done. Dude, it took you half an hour and you saved 3 times. Finally. Wanna watch a movie? Oh my god! Yeah, we didn't get along. And then, for Christmas one year, there was a combination present under the tree for me and my brother, and lo and behold, that was how we got our first PlayStation 2. I am not ashamed to admit that I went into the bathroom and cried for like an hour because I was convinced utterly and completely in that moment that my parents hated me. This was clearly not a gift for me. I would never so much as be able to hold the controller as long as my brother still lived in the house with us. I was pissed. It was not a happy Christmas. In my parents' defense, they did try to find a game that would be a strictly me game. Unfortunately, the game that they got me was Cookies and Cream. Now, they picked it because it was a story about two Japanese bunnies, and it looked sufficiently feminine as to discourage my brother from wanting to play. But it's a co-op. So I either had to control both rabbits from my one controller, cutting my brain in half to control one rabbit from each hemisphere, or I had to ask my brother for help. My brother and I have only slightly better communication skills when it comes to video games than my mother and I. The good news is I did get to play, and it led to the discovery of two of my favorite game franchises outside of Donkey Kong, which remained my first love, which are Ratchet & Clank and Jak and Daxter. The bad news is that I learned how little I could trust my brother in regards to personal property when he beat all 3 of next year's Christmas games before me, despite explicitly promising not to. It got so bad that I basically had to hoard any of my games that I wanted to have the first playthrough of in my underwear drawer, which was the only place he never looked. That's right. At one point, my brother went into my room, found a game that I had hidden from him, and beat it while I was out playing with my friends. There was a 3-year span where I didn't play video games at all, and I vehemently denied any association with the term gamer in conjunction with myself, because if that was how gamers acted, well then fuck that white noise, you feel? Things did eventually get better after my brother moved out, because to my understanding of events, my father said, join the army or GTFO, noob, and there is no reality where my brother, at that point in his life, would survive without the support of someone, be it my parents or Uncle Sam. I only might have fared better because my network of friends was wider and offered me a greater variety of couches to crash on. The PlayStation 2 was our main console at the time, and my brother took it with him after basic training, which meant that even if I wanted to break my 3-year self-enforced VG ban and play Ratchet, I couldn't, at least until one of my friends generously bought me one for my birthday. After that, I played Ratchet & Clank from the time that I arose in the barely classified as morning to the time when I crashed the next morning, barring school, lather, rinse, repeat. And while I never came even halfway close to my brother's level of unhealthy infatuation with the virtual world, I was pretty obnoxious for a while there. And after school I made more friends, all of whom were equally into games, and one of whom introduced me to what I might possibly consider the best not-a-kids game of all time. Psychonauts. As I understand it, the only reason this isn't a more widely known game is because of how little it was advertised before and at the time of its release. For those of you who don't know, you play Raz, a young boy who's run away from the circus to infiltrate a psychic summer camp for children. Sounds pretty chintzy, right? Well, sure, until you consider the themes of murder and mayhem that run rampant through the game. It's not even that subtle, folks. There are 2 characters in the game who, if you position yourself near them but out of their line of sight, turn from bubbly cheerleaders who obnoxiously and continually cheer you through every level into deeply deluded alchemists with a suicide pact because they believe that shedding their physical bodies will increase their psychic power. Summer camp! One of the kids forms a small mafia with the help of an obviously Russian stereotype, and one kid has to wear a tinfoil helmet, otherwise he will sporadically cause small animals to explode. Summer camp! Telekinetic bears. Pyrokinetic cougars. Summer camp. Across the lake from the main camp is a mental institution where you must traverse the patient's psyches in order to progress, which means that you experience the mind of people with bipolar disorder, split personality, intermittent explosive disorder, and even paranoid schizophrenia. Summer camp. The game rocks, you should check it out. Moving on. The PlayStation 2 and the N64 remained our main gaming consoles for a long time, long past the time when most people would have moved on to the Xbox, the PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360. A couple of years after the Xbox 360 came out, we finally got one, and our first games were the Rock Band games. For a few years after that, there were only a couple of games that joined our gaming collection, and one of those was my fault because I wanted to move my mom into more current gaming. So, for Christmas one year, I got her Spyro Dawn of the Dragon. And yes, I regret it. Deeply. Yes, deeply. To make matters worse, it's a two-player game, meaning that for my mom to play it and beat it with any sort of efficiency, I couldn't just leave her to the inexplicable machinations of the two-player bot. There's a couple of days of my life I'll never get back. Changing tack for a moment, my dad is notoriously hard to shop for at Christmas time, especially when it comes to video games. He plays Diablo, and he's a pretty serious dude, so I'm pretty sure that Skylander and Pokemon won't tickle his fancy, and I'm just not sure how he'll take the whimsical brutality of Borderlands. But one year I decided to give it a shot, which led to me purchasing The Witcher for PC, I still have no idea how he liked that one, and Darksiders for the Xbox. This was the best purchase that I could possibly have made. Now, my dad had already applied for and obtained directorship of the base where he now works, which means that he was only home for Christmas. It also means he didn't have an Xbox where he was living, and so he left Darksiders with us. Now, I respect the ownership of a video game, so it stayed in its plastic packaging until my dad visited for 2 weeks next spring. While he was home, I suggested that we check it out, intending to watch and see if I should go out and pick up my own copy. Over the course of one day, the ownership of the game changed hands from my father to me when we discovered that though the concept was of interest to him, my father is helpless in the face of an Xbox controller that is not in the shape of a guitar. He quickly retreated back to Diablo, which I am not ashamed to admit that I would probably never be able to play because keyboard controls confuse me and I'd probably die in the time it takes me to find the thing that heals me or spam kills my enemies. While my mother stayed to watch me rampage through hordes of demons and zombies called Wicked in the game, while unfolding a story about the conspiracies of heaven, hell, and the supposedly neutral Shard Council. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, during which I did other things such as eating, sleeping, chores, and work, Darksiders supplanted Donkey Kong as my favorite video game. Which is huge. For me, your experience may vary, I don't really care. The next Christmas, while my family played its traditional game of trying to fool Dad about what was in the box in his hands, seriously, it's harder than it sounds. One year we got him a number 5 jack plane, which is a woodworking tool, and it comes in a cardboard box with no outer markings, and his first guess was a number 5 jack plane. Hardcore. That year my father tried to trick me into thinking that he mistakenly bought me the Darksiders 2 strategy guide instead of the Darksiders 1 strategy guide to help me find all the warrior shards and the wrath shards and the health shards in the game. At which point I got very excited because when it comes to things like this, my father does not make mistakes. I have gone Christmas shopping with my father. I have watched him examine a box for upwards of 5 minutes before ultimately deciding that this was not exactly what he wanted to buy for that person. There was no way, absolutely no way, that A, he mistook Darksiders 2 strategy guide for the Darksiders 1 strategy guide, and B, that he put the Darksiders 2 strategy guide under the tree without also putting the Darksiders 2 game there as well. It was a very good Christmas for me. Death is hot. Just saying. And his voice? I need a cold shower just thinking about it. So yes, I don't play a lot of games, but the games that I do play, I love to pieces. So I guess it's just a combination of poor gaming relations early on and being selective in my gameplay experience. I tried to play Mass Effect, but being that I'm notoriously horrible at first-person shooters and third-person shooters, I didn't get very far. BS keeps telling me I should have started with a second one, but who starts a game franchise in the middle? Of course, this is the guy who started Ratchet & Clank from Tools of Destruction, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. Although I'm fairly certain that if I had offered him the parallel of starting Phantasy Star at the Game 4 rather than Game 1, he'd have shit a brick. Gamers. Oh, and lest I leave you with the confused notion that I hate my brother, here's a story of one of our virtual experiences that was quite delightful. My brother has a James Bond game for the N64. I think it's GoldenEye, but don't quote me on that because I only ever played it the one time. Now this was one of those times that I wanted to play the N64 and I let him know that, and his response was to plug in a second controller and tell me that there was a versus mode. And it's not really my cup of tea, but I figured it was the best virtual hit I was gonna get, so I sat down and picked up the controller. It was at this point that my brother informed me that there was a weaponless option, and I, tickled by the imagery, agreed to play a few bouts with no guns and no knives. What followed was a 10-minute virtual slap fight with juvenile trash talk and sound effects that ended in a uncontrollable giggle fit that must have looked very strange to our mother, who watched us laugh for 1 full minute before leaving the room without ever telling us why she came in the first place. Now that is some good times.